Okay, what we're going to do here is a engine pre-trip inspection. We're going to check our 4 fluid levels, one being the engine coolant, which you can see it needs a little bit here, the other being our windshield washer fluid. Then you'll check your oil, which is over on the other side there. You can see that yellow dipstick. And then we will also check the power steering fluid. When he starts to ask you about the engine compartment, or you start to talk about the engine compartment, I should say, you want to mention all your belts, your hoses. Nothing has bulges, cuts, frays, shiny threads. Everything is, all the clamps are tight. There's nothing loose, hanging down. There's nothing dripping. There's no leaking fluids. You're going to mention your alternator right here. You're going to mention this serpentine belt, and this serpentine belt cannot exceed 3/4 of an inch of play. You'll mention your water pump, which is down here connected to the fan. You'll mention your fan and your fan blades, and there's no missing fan blades. There's no fluids leaking from your radiator. I always tell people to mention these parts down here in case he wants you to talk about that. He may make you just move on. Talking about leaf springs, U-bolts, brake chambers, brake line, push rod, slack adjuster, brake linings aren't worn dangerously thin, the axle, the shock absorber, no missing parts, no air leaking. Again, your steer tire will exceed 4/32 of an inch. Now going to the other side. Here you will talk about your steering linkage. Here's your power steering fluid reservoir. You will check that. Make sure that that's to the proper level. You'll pull your oil out. You'll check that. Make sure that's the proper level. You'll again talk about your hoses, air lines, all these wires. Make sure that there's no shiny threads, bulges, cuts, or frays. You can't hear the air leaking. You talk about the gearbox here. It's intact. There's no missing parts. It's secured. Your pitman arm right here and drag link. You talk about this castle nut and that it doesn't have any shiny threads. It has the cotter key in place. The joints aren't worn or loose. You'll also then again talk about your brake chamber. Your push rod is not bent, damaged. Your slack adjuster, air lines, no air leaking. When you mention your leaf springs and your suspension, you'll say that there's no missing parts. All the nuts and bolts are intact. Again, 4/32 on a steer tire. From this point on, I think you'll talk about your steering. Now, it says that you're supposed to check the steering from inside, but I always told my guys before to check it from out here to make sure that it doesn't move more than 2 inches or 10 degrees. Now, you're supposed to check, it says with power steering in the cab while the truck's running. You'll also mention this longitudinal frame, that it doesn't have any aftermarket welds and there's no damage done to that. I think we've got it covered.